committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, October 20th. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Buscaino and O'Farrell. Thank you very much. We're going to first open it up for general public comment. Do we have any cards on general public comment?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close general public comment then. And with that, I've got a number of items on consent. First, I'd like to take items, I'm going to read the list through. Most of these, let's see, 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Any specials on those?
Move the items.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move the items. And those are approved. Those are approved unanimously, no objection, and no cards on those items. So those items are approved.
No, sir.
All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and open it up to number 5. We have no public comment cards on number 5.
We have one, sir.
We have one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Khalid?
Item 5, motion Harris, Dawson, Price, Weston, relative to response to surge in homicides in 77th, Southeast, and Newton divisions of Los Angeles Police Department.
And before you speak on that, is there any other public comment cards on this item? Seeing none, then you'll be the only speaker. We do have a council member here that we're going to ask to speak after you as well. So, good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Khalid Shah. I'm the executive director of Stop the Violence Foundation, and my mother lives in Council District number 8, where there's been over 39 homicides in the month of August. And right now, I'm just trying to find out what's going on. We need to support whatever needs to be supported in that area to make sure that our community is safe, our mothers, our children, our families are safe. It's crazy. In light of what happened last night with the mayor, there needs to be some community involvement in whatever decisions that are being made in this community, because what has happened in our community cannot happen. So I'm just asking, whatever we need to do, I don't know what's going on with the grid, I don't know what's going on with, who's making the decisions in City Hall, but I know the community needs to be involved. Simple as that. That's it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go ahead and open it up to Councilmember Harris Dawson. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Chairman Englander and members, for accommodating me this morning. We're here to comment, and we've asked a lot of community members to come and join us to be part of the discussion this morning. We're here to comment on a motion that we put forward several weeks ago in response to the outbreak of homicides that we saw in South LA. In the month of August, it has been quelled somewhat since then, but it's still way too high. Our intention with this motion is to cause a public discussion so we can get the best input for all of our programming, so community policing programming, our gang intervention programming, as well as other city departments and how they can play a role in helping reduce the outbreak that we've seen. Los Angeles, I want to put on the record, is doing well by comparison to other big cities in the U.S., but our homicide rate and our violent crime rate is still way too high. And so we think it's always a good opportunity to, again, get the best thinking from our community, get the best thinking from law enforcement, get the best thinking from gang intervention workers, get the best thinking from social service providers, educators, and the like, to make sure our programming is the best it can be. We also know that we have some places where things are working a lot, even within South LA, and so even with the outbreak that we've seen, Watts has done particularly well. Mm-hmm. We think that most people on all sides of the matter give credit to the Watts Gang Task Force and the community policing program that is there. We think versions of that can happen in other parts of the city where we see outbreaks as well, and so we want to see if there's a way to make that happen. And so this motion asks the city departments to convene meetings, pull everybody together, put it all up on the wall, see what we can do, now, see what we need more resources to do, and how we can go about raising those resources, and then making sure that we have the human talent to put on the streets to make sure this goes well. And so I'm confident that we can do much better than we have done, and that Los Angeles can continue to lead the nation's big city in the reduction of violent crime. Thank you all.
No, thank you very much. And let me just add to that. I can't thank you enough for this motion, and you're spot on. The city's doing a great job in silos, oftentimes, whether it's GRID, whether it's other youth intervention and prevention programs, whether it's Rec and Parks and now Friday Night Lights and other programs, whether it's working with after-school programs or families. But oftentimes, they operate in silos, and there's not a collaborative effort where they meet together regularly with the public, transparently, to talk about exactly the issues that were brought up, which is, what are you doing and who's making the decisions? How are we measuring it? What can we be doing better? That's always the question we've got to ask. What can we be doing better? It's always easy enough, as you said, Councilman, to say, well, we're doing a good job. And there are a lot of elements that are doing well.
Right.
The real question always becomes, what can we be doing better? One life lost is too much. It's a lifelong tragedy for their friends and the families. And as a victim myself of a violent crime, who lost a loved one who was shot, I've sat there in the audience before I was a council member. I begged at the podium downstairs for a reward motion that anything that would help lead detectives to the apprehension and conviction was welcomed. And you never get over that. A community doesn't get over that.
That's right.
What you've done and hitting the ground running, quite frankly, is incredibly impressive. As now 100 days or so in office, I applaud your efforts, but this motion and bringing everybody together collectively is so critically time-sensitive and important that we're going to rush this through, put this on the full City Council agenda, and hopefully at that point send it urgent forthwith with your recommendation to get this ball rolling and get that community input and dialogue moving as quickly as possible. And I just wanted to take the time to thank you for your leadership in this.
Thank you, and I just want to thank the members of the committee. I reached out to all of you. We're very new to this building and new to elected office, and so we're trying to take the best of what we learned as a community organizer and apply it to the situation here. Also, trying to create a situation where people can be constructive, right? So, you hear things, you go to this meeting and you hear a thing, and then you go to this meeting and you hear a thing, and then you go to the police precinct and you hear the stuff there, and so it's like, hey, everybody, let's all get in a room and figure it out. And so, thank you all for your guidance and your support on this. I do think that we'll have a very good outcome if we continue to press the mark and support each other, and most importantly, listen to each other, and again, build a better and brighter future for all of us.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Please. And just so you know, colleagues, I know the councilman has to go to another meeting, but we do have several partners from Rec and Parks, as well as GRID, LAPD. We're going to hold this item on the desk, come back to it in the meeting for them to respond, because we can get through a couple other items as well. But I want to open it up to you as well.
Good. Well, while Mr. Marquis Arastansis is here before us, I just want to commend you. Marquis, the good Lord put you here for a reason. I truly believe in a time where South Los Angeles has experienced a high volume of violent crime, the fact that you bring your expertise, your love, your compassion for community, I'm happy to see. It's very unfortunate, but you leading this effort to mobilize the community, all community-based organizations, law enforcement, all of our community partners, to seize these violent acts in South Los Angeles. I too was in your shoes within my first 100 days. We saw a uptick in violent crime and homicides in Wilmington. We experienced 8 within the first couple months in office, where we mobilized the community on the ground in marches and community rallies. What was born out of that was I Heart Wilmington, a new generation of leaders calling for change. and we hope to see the same in South Los Angeles. I've been blessed with inheriting the Watts Gang Task Force, a number of key community partners who have really called for change and working on relationship-based policing with our the police department and also our gang intervention workers who I see here today. We owe a debt of gratitude for those on the ground each and every night on 24/7, getting called out, working with the law enforcement in both the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department in response to homicides in our city, in our county. So I commend those individuals out on the ground combating and squashing rumors. In Watts, although we haven't seen an uptick in homicides, we've experienced a few in the last few weeks, to the point where we had a 16-year-old shot and killed. But the community stood up and said enough was enough and helped with law enforcement officials to the point where we made several arrests in response to that homicide. And that was, we owe a debt of gratitude to not only our law enforcement officers, but also the community who too were outraged. A number is a number, but a life is a life. And at the same time, we together as a community need to stand and say enough is enough and look at the root cause of the problem, as I often did as a senior lead officer, and that's reaching out to block by block, neighbors by neighbors, and working with our faith-based community and also with our officers on the street. So thanks for your leadership. Looking forward to hearing more from all of our partners here in the city.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marquisa, I think that you bring a particular level of experience and ability to this conversation, so I'm really appreciative of your leadership as well. And I really think it's incumbent upon all of us, no matter what council district we represent, to take a spike in homicide anywhere personally. I think we need to really take a look at that. I know that in my district, assaults are up. I'm really hyper-focused right now in Hollywood, where there are a handful of nightclubs that are operating in violation of their permits. I mean, gross violation of their permits. We're trying to figure out how it is that they've been led to stay open all these months and sometimes years when they are really providing an environment that fosters violent crime and assaults against patrons, against one another. And I think there is a lot of tension out in the streets in every council district, and it's a real powder keg that we need to get control of. And I'm also hopeful that as we host these community meetings, as we have these town halls, and I think we need lots of them across the city, that we can make sure that they don't get interrupted and stopped, so that the dialogue just stops. People show up and they want to be heard. They want to have their voices expressed and heard. And I want to make sure that we can provide, the ground rules for civility so that we can hear everything from everyone. And I know that's been an issue at the police commission hearings, and it was an issue at the town hall last night from what I gathered and what I saw. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we want to hear from every perspective out there. I know I certainly do. So I thank you for your leadership, and I think that we address this head on, directly, and hear from everyone, and only then can we really land upon solutions that we hadn't thought of before. So I think this sort of we're all in this together point of view is what's really going to lead to solutions. So again, I thank you for your leadership.
I sure appreciate that, Councilmember O'Farrell. I think that's something that I know South LA longs for a lot. There's often the feeling that when something's happening to us, it's just us, and suddenly we're not a part of LA. And so to hear leadership like you step up and say that, I think is a big deal. The other thing I would point out that's another source of frustration for us in South LA, but I think around the city. Last night there was also a prayer vigil on Vermont and Manchester. We shut down Vermont, one of the main thoroughfares, a prayer vigil for homicide victims. There were hundreds of people there. I had a town hall meeting, over 500 people there. There have been other town hall meetings. Ministers have organized watches on Friday and Saturday nights when homicides are highest on the major intersections. And so everyday people are doing the work all the time, and it doesn't always get noticed. And so this is an opportunity to lift those folks up, bring them to the table, and again, shine the light. Because I think a lot of times disruption gets a lot more attention than construction.
Right.
And again, it's all important. It's all a part of our system. But I think that we got to always keep our eye on the people who are trying to build and build the kind of communities deserve. So thank you all so much. I don't want to take up too much more time in your committee.
And we're going to have this in the full city council as soon as possible. When can we get this scheduled so we know it's all coming?
The next available date is Tuesday, October 27th.
Okay. So Tuesday, October 27th is when we can expect this for council. We did have, I missed another card that we did have on this item. So the final speaker on this item, I apologize, is Robert Rubin. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I represent Vermont Village Community Development Corporation in South Central, and I work along with an advocacy group, Advocates for Peace and Urban Unity, and we actually have the Southeast 1 grid for the Gang Reduction Youth Development Grant. And what we found in the last summer, we lost 2 intervention workers that were out there in the streets doing intervention, and they were killed 2 weeks apart. So with that being said, the work that we do, the men and women in the streets that try to protect and to help our communities rebuild and reduce crime and violence, we support this motion, and we think that you should pay a close attention to those who are in the streets and doing this work and hold everybody accountable. Because a lot of times, money flows out, but you don't see the results, and you don't have a better way to measure your results. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the crime data, you look at the areas, and you look at the men and women on the street that put their lives on the line every day, we hope that you would consider all of the motion that have gone forward and give Marquise, that's a good friend of mine, but Councilman Marquise, his motion. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And that'll conclude the public comment on this. I know we have several department members here, Rec and Parks as well as Grid, and if you can come up to the table. I know we're expecting a particular representative, a special guest from LAPD, but they were stuck in, there was an overturn, for those of you that don't know, there was an overturned truck on the freeway that really caused and wreaked havoc on our roadway systems. It's one thing for sure that I think we can all agree on that affects our daily lives, the traffic here in Los Angeles, and I appreciate all of you coming down here this morning as well. It only took me an hour and a half this morning, so it's not too bad. An hour and a half. So with that, we'll go ahead if you can open it up. Good morning.
Good morning.
I believe we have somebody from the city attorney's office here as well. They want to join us. If not, please. Okay.
Well, no, today I'm only representing the mayor's office.
Okay. All right. And I know we're going to have a broad discussion in council on this, so we can do a quick overview, but I think having this broad discussion in council with all the members weighing in will be critically important. But more importantly is moving this motion through so we can start the process that's outlined in the motion by Councilmember Harris-Dawson. So, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ann Tremblay, and I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about what the Mayor's Office and the Grid Office have been doing in response to the uptick in violence in South LA. Before I start my remarks about that specifically, I do also want to thank all the grid providers that have joined us here today. There's many of them, primarily from the intervention side of the Grid House, but our prevention providers are also a key component of the work of Grid, and they do the tremendous work in the community because the approach of Grid is a community-based approach to have each of our providers be able to support a particular area that they know well and that they work in and day out, as well as having those intervention workers on the streets that they know so well.
And can we have them stand up and be recognized, please? Really appreciate all your work. Thank you so much. Thank you. These are our guardian angels in the city of Angels. Thank you for keeping us safe. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
as you well know, and we've talked before through the budget process, through Public Works and the Gang Committee, the grid did go through a significant expansion in anticipation of some of the needs that we've now seen as part of this spike in South LA. As early as last November, in discussions with LAPD, we saw that crime was starting to trend up, and the mayor directed us to do a very deep dive and a deep analysis, both getting community feedback, law enforcement feedback, and also doing a deep data-driven approach to where we needed to add additional grid services. So we've talked about that in other forums, so I won't bore you with that today, but we did execute that expansion with the new contract cycle, with the new fiscal year. So we're just getting many new grid zones up and running. We added 6 new grid zones. We added significant new territory within CD8, CD9, and CD15. No surprise there, because the data showed us that's where we needed to be. Previously, in the past couple fiscal years, our providers were servicing areas outside their grid zones because the need was there, but that's not what they were contracted to do. So that was a significant portion of the expansion, as well as increasing the dollars and equalizing the intervention and prevention dollars, because we saw that we needed to sort of stymie and stop the problem through the intervention services, but also maintain strong prevention services so that we're eliminating a next generation of folks and young people that might become gang involved. Specifically, as we've ramped up this, we're looking in this year, in addition to the expansion, of expanding the role of our providers, of having them get unsiloed with other community-based organizations, particularly on issues of domestic violence and human trafficking, which cross over with the violence that we see in many of these communities, as well as on the trafficking front in terms of sex trafficking, cross over with gang activity and gang criminality. And we want our providers, both prevention and intervention, and our intervention workers to be in the best position to be leaders and affect change in their community on these important issues. And as you know, on domestic violence, that's one of the drivers of our crime increase. We're seeing violence in the home as well as on the streets in the community. So we're doing training, enhanced meetings and connections among our DART and other domestic violence providers in the communities, along with our grid agencies, so we can enhance that work. We've also added on a research and evaluation component of grid, of expanding our model and looking at our model in terms of trauma-informed care. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that approach. It's come up in a lot of different contexts, that when you're dealing with young people or folks in a community who've been subject to trauma, that trauma that they've experienced even in childhood can have a long-lasting effect on their ability to succeed in school, work, and be positively connected to pro-social activities and be successful members of our community. Some of that goes to some of these root causes. Law enforcement works very hard to react to when there's crime spikes. They've built up, LAPD has built up the community relationship division that we're working very closely with to engage the community better and do all the things that they're going to talk about to respond to this. We're working in partnership and collaboration with them, but also parallel to them with our providers, getting that feedback. We have a South LA strategy team meeting that's been going on with some of our most seasoned intervention workers, so we can determine what areas we need to deploy some of the funding that you all approved last year to go to a more rapid and nimble response to when we have these upticks, to identify some folks who can be crisis ambassadors to go into communities where we don't have year-round grid coverage. So we're working to get that implemented right now. We've also been bringing together all our South LA agencies, new and old, so that they can learn from each other. Our South LA team, the staff in the grid office, has done a lot to bring together community, all kinds of community partners, to go to the use of force training that LAPD does, so the community members can see how that use of force approach goes. We've also had some community-based events that were driven by our grid providers to address issues on a community level around the issues of boys and men of color and the community-driven approach to the My Brother's Keeper initiative. Just so you know, we value and look to community all the time, both through our providers but also through the grid staff. Our staff goes out and attends meetings, the Watts Gang Task Force, South LA Ceasefire, other community meetings that might be LAPD led, and we're committed to continuing that, to hear those voices so that we can constantly improve. That we know that there's a great base here for grid. I inherited a great base foundation, but there's no question we can do more and better. We can do that with increased collaboration, getting unsiloed, to your point, Councilmember Englander, a big problem that I've seen over the last year and a half. Within the city, within our city family, among and between agencies in the community, the DV and gang ones, for example, doing great work, but not necessarily realizing the crossover, and our city and county partners. And I think one of the things that I'm hoping comes from this is that us as a city, the mayor, the city council, can help drive really setting up some systematic change to have that collaboration across jurisdictional lines, so that we can make this work strong on a regional basis, and that we can make it long-lasting beyond any of us being in our particular roles, that we can systematize it, institutionalize it, find ways to fund it, find community, public-private partnerships to fund it in the best possible way so that we can give the community what they deserve in terms of a response to when there's upticks, but also to go to some of these, the root causes. And so I will share with you, I don't think what happens a lot, I hear from a lot of people in this seat, as you can imagine, that there's a lot of areas where the work that GRID does is valuable and important to the youth and families we serve, both as the case-managed clients as well as through summer night lights and Friday nights, and that is well complemented by the street intervention work that our folks that are here are doing. But beyond that, the things that I hear about are the things that you probably hear about from your constituents on a regular basis. Jobs and availability to jobs. And we know a population that has been affected by poverty and gang violence and other things may have particular barriers and challenges to jobs. So seeing how we can make sure we can bring jobs to these communities, housing, and education, all those access and opportunity issues are particularly important for the populations that our grid providers are trying to serve, because they are at particular vulnerabilities. And I just want to close by saying our vision and future for GRID has always been, I think, from everything I've read and seen, been measured by crime reduction. And that's an important measurement, no doubt. It is a comprehensive violence reduction strategy. But GRID is so much more than that. Our agencies are so much more than that. They're not just statistics. The work they do, you heard Mr. Rubin about the folks that got killed, they're so much more than statistics. They're the stories of these young people. And more importantly, this is about strengthening and building families. And that's what we're working to measure in GRID. And we have a database and systems and methods in place for that accountability and monitoring and compliance. And we can strengthen those even more, but we have those systems in place so that we can measure our outcomes, and that's the future for us. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good morning, council members. My name is Kevin Regan. I'm Assistant General Manager of Operations for Recreation and Parks. And I was hoping Ann could do my presentation. That was so great. She really covered everything.
Well, then you can be brief. I know.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just wanted to say that Recreation and Parks very much supports this motion. We also support a comprehensive strategy to address these problems. As you know, Recreation and Parks operates throughout the city in every community. And when there's problems in a particular community, Recreation and Parks facilities and the employees that work at those facilities are really part of the fabric of that community. And our department is very much affected by whatever problems may be occurring in the neighborhoods, and it does often spill over to the parks. So we do have a number of strategies, a number of partners. We work very closely with GRID, as you know, and you're very aware of the programs that we do. But I just wanted to talk to you about two things that we will be bringing forward in the budget process that are very important to our general manager. One is our Park Ranger program and the re-establishment of that program and refunding and redeployment of rangers throughout the city. So that is going to be really one of our major budgetary items coming forward this year to look at. We've been doing that incrementally, and our general manager wants to look at this year at doing a larger bite at the apple on that. So you'll be seeing that. It's very important for the rangers to be able to deploy to the parks, not necessarily, absolutely not to replace LAPD in any way, but there's different things that rangers can do. It's a very versatile position, and there's a lot of things they can do at the park with the staff, with the community that are not always resources available for LAPD to do. Also, I know that you're all aware of our Class Parks program, and that program is really a prevention program. The genesis of the program was out of a multiple homicide in San Fernando Valley, and really the idea is to bring youth into the rec center, to create teen clubs, to have a place for youth to be able to do a variety of activities. If you ask anybody in recreation and parks if class parks exist today, the answer is yes. However, the program has been defunded over the years, so it really is not the same as it was in the beginning. So to build up the Class Parks program, to really start that youth development back at the rec center with intensive, with staff and all the elements of the Class Parks program, those are two other things that we'll be looking at. Anyway, we've been involved with this. We've attended a number of pre-meetings already. We look forward to continuing to be a piece of the overall strategy. We believe that parks can be really the centers of a community, and they should be. And we're just here to support and ready to be a part of the solution.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, did you have any questions or statements?
Just real quick, Mr. Chair, I'm so glad to hear you talk about class parks and park rangers too, of course. But class parks, because the monies that we just approved from the federal government go specifically to parks in neighborhoods that are traditionally underserved, that have a crime rate that's higher than others, et cetera, a whole host of statistics that guides us to place the money where it's needed the most. And it's a wonderful, wonderful program for youth, local youth, to get jobs at recreation parks facilities. And I would love to see the funding for class parks increased in the coming years, possibly even from our own city budget to help augment the system even more. And we have several recreation parks managers at this point and facility leaders that came through the class park system that had some issues in their youth. So anytime we can come up with programs and ideas that bring additional resources to our traditionally underserved communities, and class parks is a shining example of that program, then I'm all for it. So I would love to hear, even in this committee, moving forward, more ideas about how we can embellish that program even more. I think in light of the conversation we've had today, it's really, really important and timely.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I want to just, before we go ahead and move this on to council, one of the key components of this, and I think this is what we hear, everybody's doing a great job, but then some elements are getting worse, or I think the biggest frustration is this, is everybody's doing a great job, except the community or parts of the community don't feel they have an input or seat at the table, or there's transparency, or they have decision-making, or they know exactly what's going on. And that's where the spirit of this motion, I believe, comes from. And it says here that it, in fact, specifically directs all city-funded intervention agencies to convene monthly meetings. So there's your transparency, monthly meetings with the public, and provide progress reports and discuss strategies, and I think that's key. Discussing strategies, I think, needs to be interpreted as such, not to just show up at a monthly meeting and say, here are the statistics, here's how well we're doing, here's how many lives we've turned around, here's how many folks have been signed up or parks have been opened, or here's a story about a particular member of the community that was able to turn their life around. We need to talk about the ones that didn't. We need to talk about those successful strategy efforts to create new programs as well and try to reach more folks. And I don't believe, quite frankly, there was a statement made at some point that we just need to find more resources and funds. I don't know that that's the case. I think we've got a lot of resources and funds. I think we've got a lot of great people. It's a matter of getting them together regularly. It's a matter of looking at the systems that you talked about that are in place. We have systems in place to start measuring more, and that's really important. And sharing that information is really important. And it's not just, you're right, it's not just about crime stat reductions or increases or fatalities, homicides, whatever that might be. There's much more to measure, but it needs to be shared and transparent on a regular basis, not just in committee or council, but with the public. And so I thank you for that input, because you're absolutely spot on. And that's exactly what needs to be done. As both was said by Councilmember Harris Dawson, by our staff in the city, but more importantly was said by the community, and not just here today, but loud and clear, consistently over the last several months, and our departments as well. So I want to thank you for all of that. I want to send this full city council. I believe we've got unanimous support on this, and we'll go ahead, unless Councilwoman Martinez wants to add anything to this specific item, we'll go ahead and move it to council. Okay, so moved. Yeah, that'll be the order, unanimously approved without objections. I want to thank you all again for coming and truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that'll take us to a couple other items. Our final two items.
Item 3.
I'm sorry, item 3. Yeah, let's go ahead and go to item 3.
Item 3, LAPD report relative to the property crime fingerprint backlog and filling critical vacant positions in the LAPD's Scientific Investigation Division.
Well, actually, let's go ahead and hold 3 for a moment, and we're going to go to items 20 and 21 first.
Very good. Items 20 and 21 are communications and ordinances from the city attorney. The first, relative to requiring handguns located in a residence to be kept in a locked container or disabled with a trigger lock. The other is an ordinance to exempt retired peace officers and qualified reserve officers from the ban on possessing large capacity magazines.
All right, thank you very much. So first we're going to take these items together if we could, unless there's any objection to bifurcate. Okay, so together we have items 20 and, we have 2 cards on 20 and 2 on 21. And 1 more on 21. Are there any other speakers that wish to speak on 20 or 21 that have not yet submitted cards? Okay. And those are the cards we have. Those are the cards we will take. So on item 20, we have Elizabeth Kahn. Good morning. And then followed by Peter Repovich.
Hi, good morning. My name's Elizabeth Kahn, and I'm 24 years old, and I'm a native of Los Angeles. 3 years ago, my next-door neighbor, who was mentally ill, he was going through a lot of depression and paranoia, and he was also an avid gun owner. And so his psychiatrist had actually recommended to his wife that all of the guns in the house be stored. And so his wife took the recommendation, but not all of the guns were stored properly. And so one day when I was thankfully not home, he actually chased his caregiver out of the house with a gun to her head. She ran to my house looking for shelter, and he shot her 5 times on my doorstep. The bullet that pierced my door narrowly missed my mom's body, and basically after he shot his caregiver, he committed suicide on my doorstep.
sorry. I got to ask you to wrap it up.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so I'm basically here to urge that this safe storage ordinance be passed.
Okay.
And the one thing is, I believe the wording has been changed from the original Sunnyvale ordinance.
Okay, I've got it. That's, if you have anything in writing you want to submit, you could do that, but
Okay.
I got to keep all the speakers consistent, otherwise open it up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Repovich, item 20. Did you wish to speak on 20 and 21? You have cards in for both at the same time?
I do. You want me to speak to both, sir?
A minute on each, yeah. 20 and
Okay.
21?
Thank you for listening to me for a minute here. Good morning, everybody, and I just wanted to reiterate our support for both 20 and 21. We think the amendments are important, fair, and they help the public be safer, both from a handgun protection point of view and from people becoming victims of violent crimes. So thank you for your support, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, on items 21, Margot Bennett, followed by Suzanne Verge, if you want to come on up as well. I want to thank you both for coming this morning. Thank you. Morning.
Good morning. My name's Margot Bennett. I'm the Executive Director of Women Against Gun Violence. At a time when it appears our country has reached a tipping point regarding gun violence and the need for gun safety regulations, our Public Safety Committee should be standing behind the city's current strong ban on the possession of high-capacity magazines, an ordinance that currently doesn't allow for exemptions. Women Against Gun Violence remains committed to a no exemption policy on all public safety legislation, including those regarding guns, until we can be provided with real data that proves the need for these exemptions and outweighs the need for public safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Verge with the Los Angeles chapter of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. We're not taking a position on this, but I was more under the general comment. I was talking with Margot, just when you have a reserve police officer or a retired police officer, how do you identify them in a mass shooting situation? And I know LAPD came up and gave I found it fascinating, that they have to come back every year and I guess be certified. And I just was wondering if it was like a manual dexterity test or if it was a mental health, dementia. So I was coming up here more in the general comment section, just curious about those issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So that concludes all the public comment on this. And with that, colleagues, let me just open it up by saying that I want to thank, first and foremost, Councilmember Paul Krikorian, who's really been a leader on these issues. These are some of the toughest, quite frankly, toughest but most reasonable gun laws we've seen in our country. And in fact supported, as we heard, by the men and women of the Los Angeles Police Department and many members of the public. And I say reasonable because the whole idea and spirit is, we know we have guns on the street, is let's get them secured no matter what. Even with reasonable people, and a lot of people have said to me, quite frankly, colleagues, that, and they've, from both sides, but let me just talk about one side for a moment. Gun owners who have approached me, who have sent emails and phone calls and in public, saying, how can you expect me and why should I have to lock up my gun in the privacy of my own home? To which my response is this. Really? If you have, this is first of all a misdemeanor. It's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor because we don't have the ability to do anything more than that as a city. It's a misdemeanor. Now, having said that, if you have a police officer in the privacy of your own home where you have a gun out that is not in your control, mind you, very strict language, in your control, and there's a police officer in your home and you are either being cited or arrested for a misdemeanor for not having it in your control, you got other serious problems. You have some other very serious issues. Recently, somebody asked me, in fact, this was a former assemblywoman in a public forum, said, well, I keep a gun under my pillow, and, and I live alone, and I don't want to have to lock it up. And I said, with all due respect, you have a police officer under your pillow with your gun, you got some other issues. So this is reasonable, but again, some of the toughest gun regulations that's supported by law enforcement. And I want to thank Councilman Krikorian for that. And I believe with that, I'd like to open it up on first and foremost number 20 to my colleagues, and I'll start with Councilwoman Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have an amendment for item 20. I'd like to make a motion that we amend the language under section B, prohibition under number 2 to read as follows: carried on the person of the owner or other lawfully authorized user of the handgun over age of 18. The San Francisco ordinance includes the language, and previous draft of this ordinance had as well, so I think it was left out for whatever reason. I'd like to make an amendment to this motion.
Okay, I'll second that motion, but I asked the city attorney to come up if I could, just to weigh in on that. I want to make sure we're covered.
So that's B2?
That would be page 4,
Right.
B2, and it would take the word or off and say user of the handgun over 18,
Correct.
colon, or.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, council members. David Michelson, and with me is Brian Satelli. We're with the Office of the City Attorney. Pleased to be with you today. That modification, I think, certainly is fine. The only question would be, is it on 2 and on 3?
It's only on 2.
Okay.
Okay.
B2, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for the city attorney on 20?
The only request I would have is that we would split the vote between 20 and 21.
Yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
So move item 20 as amended?
So we'll go ahead and move item 20 as amended. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay. That's approved. That'll go on to council. Now we'll go ahead and take up item 21. I do have a technical amendment. There was actually just a typo, not an amendment, but a typo on the code section, I believe. Under the code section where it currently reads 836.6. Actually, it should be, if you could walk us through that, what it should be, rather than what it is.
It should be changed to 830.6, I believe. Currently, it's 836.6.
So it should be an 830.6, not 836. So we'll go ahead and make that amendment. It was the wrong code section.
What's the 836 code?
It was the wrong section.
Wrong section.
Yeah. So it was actually not an error, but a typo.
It's a typo.
Okay. So 830.6. With that, colleagues, and I want to thank, again, the Los Angeles Police Department, the men and women of the police department, as well as Councilmember Krikorian in working on this as well. These are, from my view, not exemptions per se as much as common sense. These are geared towards sworn police officers that have gone through full post training, that have spent 25, 35, 45 years on the force. These are men and women that are force multipliers, is what the word is used by law enforcement. Whether they're off duty or retired, they have to comply with and maintain their status. And these are the reasonable, responsible, again, still toughest legislation in gun safety in the country of any city, from my understanding as well, and goes even further than many of the other codes. This is specifically looking at some technical changes where, for example, you have an officer who's been on the force for 40 years, goes in and retires, puts in his paperwork, Many of them today also become reserve officers and continue to work patrol for free. While they're off duty or they leave the retirement section and turn in their paper or turn in their badge on their last day, they also are issued as a retirement in the state of California and most states a license to carry off-duty concealed. That's allowed under state law. But however, their primary duty weapon that they've been carrying for 40 years, both on and off duty, suddenly now they're in a misdemeanor. That corrects that technical action. It doesn't open it up to anybody else other than that. We also have, again, qualified, and I think that's the key word, reserve officers, as defined in the Penal Code section 830.6. Those are authorized, sworn peace officers in accordance with law enforcement policy of the agencies that are also guided by the police officer standards and training. So it's very, very strict into who those members are. These are not people that are just simply issued ID cards or badges. These are people who go through full training in the full academy as any sworn officer full-time does as well. And so, and those are all audited by the state of California. And so with that, it preserves and protects as a technical correction as we look at this to move forward. And so any questions on that item? Okay.
I'd just like to make a comment, if I may. Happy to second this motion with you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the law enforcement community for coming in support of item 21. If you look at providing this exemption of retired peace officers and qualified reserve officers, these are retired officers who have faithfully served our city, and heaven forbid if this city were to be under attack, I want retired and reserve officers who have the experience and training to be allowed to protect the people of the city. And this is why I stand for this item before you and ask for an aye vote and move this item forward to City Council.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. So I'll ask for an aye vote. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
Let's take separate votes on each item.
There is a...
Well, I bifurcated 20 and 21.
Right, but hold on, I think we have an issue on 20. I was
20?
just on 20. The city attorney is advising that we reconsider the item to include... I wish they would have said that when we were discussing the item.
What was the question? What was the issue?
I don't know, I'm having to figure out what they're trying to do. We included the amendment only on section 2. Now they're suggesting that we do it on section 3 as well.
Well, they asked the question. We good?
So, did you want to include it in section 3 as well?
You're referring to the safe gun storage ordinance in item number 20?
Right. That was the recommendation.
The recommendation was on 2.
Correct. They're now suggesting that maybe we should add the same language.
Is that a recommendation?
It's really the prerogative of the policymakers for consistency, having the same language over the age of 18 for 2 and 3.
Well, it does have, in section 3, it does have owner, does it not?
It does.
Owner
or authorized.
Lawfully authorized.
That's right.
So that...
And that phrase, the owner or other lawfully authorized, appears in both 2 and 3.
Okay. Well, right.
So you're good with the way it is?
2 covers...
They are separate exemptions. In B, there's 1, 2, and 3. They all stand independent of each other.
That's correct.
So it would seem that if the intent is to only allow persons over the age of 18.
Got it.
Then it seems that the language should be.
Let's do this.
Item 3.
Okay, so
Let's
we
do
should
this.
include over the age of 18.
I'm sorry. Let me follow process here, if I could. We have to reconsider the item before we have a discussion. So,
Right.
for those move to reconsider, accepted. Okay, let's continue the discussion. Okay, so I agree with that, and I believe there's a motion by Ms. Martinez to add over 18 onto 3 as well. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay.
I'm sorry, just for clarification.
Now we can have
the
a discussion.
language should be over the age of 18, not over 18.
Over the age of
Over
18.
the age of
That's
18.
correct. Both on 2 and 3, over the age of 18. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's approved unanimously as amended. Now we can go back on to 21. Thank you for that catch, Ms. Martinez. And with 21, we'll go ahead and open the roll on that as well.
Englander.
Yes.
Vizcaíno.
Yes.
O'Farrell.
Yes.
Martinez.
No.
Okay, so that carries on 3-1 and moves on to council. Thank you so much. And now our final item, colleagues, is item 3.
Item 3, LAPD report relative to the property crime fingerprint backlog and filling critical vacant positions in the LAPD's Scientific Investigation Division.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
All right, if you could just walk us through this. I just have a couple questions on, we're looking at approximately $500,000 to clear up a portion of the backlog. However, it's one-time money, correct?
Correct.
My first question on this, because we've read the report, and I appreciate you submitting the report. It's very helpful, so we don't have to go through a full overview of this, and we all know, I think, what the issue is on the backlog. And I appreciate that. There's a recommendation that the department has to take it out of the unappropriated balance towards the overtime until we continue the hiring process and get the 16, I believe it's 16, hired. Correct?
The money is, during the budget process, there was the $500,000 that was placed in the UB, and we were asked to report back on what we wanted to do with it. Since that time, we've had some issues, and Deanna was here to express what those issues are.
Okay.
But the number, they've just hired 8. There's another 16 for the balance of
Right.
24 for this current fiscal year of those folks to be hired. So there's been some other issues that have come up that we wanted to modify.
Subsequent to the report, okay.
Subsequent to the report,
Great.
correct.
Okay, so where are we at now?
Basically, my name's Deanna Markley. I'm the commanding officer of Technical Investigation Division, and the latent print unit is in my command. The $500,000, when we looked into a number of different issues regarding it, cash overtime seemed to be the best way to do it. It still is. What we've had since the implementation, or since we submitted that report, was the LA County's fingerprint identification system, which we use to predominantly find most of the matches. And the system has about 400 hours of downtime, which put us dead in the water with the vacancies that we have.
400 hours of downtime
In an 8-week period.
because of
They had
technical issues, maintenance?
They had done some maintenance and upgraded the system, and somehow it wasn't working correctly. We also had some old cases that were in the system that needed to be deleted out, which we've taken care of that aspect of it, but there was still a substantial period of time that was out of our control through
This
LA.
downtime that you're referring to on the system, is that regular occurrence? Is that just a one-time occurrence because they've updated, or is this something we've seen frequently over several years?
It happens frequently, but this is the most substantial chunk of time that we've had experienced, where it's in a short period of time where it's that. It might go down for a day, for 24 hours or something like this, but this went down for weeks at a time.
Do we pay, so we're basically at a standstill where we have people employed and working, but not being able to access the system to do their work?
There is other work we can do. I mean, we can do, once a match comes back on the LAFIS system, then we do the manual comparison, because you don't rely just on the computer matching. You actually have a
Sure, but you can't get a match if the computer's down.
Right, so we just can't launch new searches. But it does slow things down dramatically. So we have not been able to keep up with our 10-case priority property crime. The violent crimes are caught up. We never let those get behind. But the property crime, where we do the 10 cases, is behind right now. So what we were asking was to amend the amount of money to use part of it to get caught up. And once we get caught up, then we expect to be able to go to either 12 cases or maybe even 13 cases, depending on the amount of time that's left in the fiscal year.
So the amendment is asking for the same $500,000?
Yes.
And by the way, was that put in the UB specifically for this purpose?
Yes.
Okay. But it's to catch up on now a further backlog because of that downtime of the computer system.
Yes, the backlog of the 10-case priority, and then once that's caught up, which we anticipate would be maybe 4 to 8 weeks to get that caught up, then we would increase the 10-case property crimes to 13.
So now we have a backlog on our minimum, not even,
Yes.
Basically, yeah.
and now we're asking for overtime for that, but you're saying, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a full report on this in writing, on exactly walking me through. Do we pay the county for access?
I don't
believe we
so,
pay for an access to it. It's just, all the LA County law enforcement agencies participate in that local database. And then that also feeds into the state. And
So we have a minimum number per division that we can't even do our minimum numbers because we can't get online to process those. So what I'd like to see is also, during those 400 hours, the actual workload indicators and what was done during that, because you said there was other things for them to do. I want to do a deeper dive on this and understand it.
Okay.
I think it's really important. We talk about a collaboration with multiple jurisdictions, and it seems like we're missing a piece. Not you guys, per se. We need to know what's going on. I'd love to pick up the phone and talk to our counterparts and say, what's happening with this? If these systems are down and our folks can't do our job, and we have a minimum because we're not even caught up to the backlog, and we see this spike in crime and the ability to create and look at patterns, to look at, we rely on data to make decisions. We're a data-driven system where we make decisions, funding decisions, deployment decisions based on data and what's happening. We also know that less than violent crime issues, whether they're theft or burglary or whatever it is, what we're looking at in terms of fingerprinting. We've got to close those before they escalate into other types of crimes. And so it's all connected and frustrating as a policymaker, as an elected official, as the chair of this committee, as the vice chair of budget and finance, and I can't even imagine where you're coming from and how frustrated you must be. So I appreciate your input on this. I want to move this forward because I don't want to wait any longer. But I'd like a written report on this to come back to this committee at a separate, just as an update. And so we can schedule that in, let's call it 60 days, give you some time. I'd like to get an analysis of what happened during this outage. What is it we were doing and what was that workload that we were working on, how many, exactly what we did, or couldn't do.
I'm sorry.
Or couldn't do.
Yeah.
It's, I think, the key. How many cases were even further behind off our 10 minimum per division, or 12, and because of that, now we're paying to catch up, and I think that's really important to get that information in writing, and then, but not leave you guys behind to fall further, particularly since we identified this money. Now we have to just use it to catch up on what we've fallen further behind, which is just insanity and frustrating. And so I appreciate your patience in this and pushing to try to catch up on this, and the hiring and personnel for working through getting this hiring done.
Great. Thank you very much.
With that, I urge my colleagues to move this forward and vote yes. Any questions?
I have a couple of quick questions. How does each division prioritize their top 10 cases?
That's usually done by the detective, and sometimes working with our fingerprint people. It's basically, they look at the type of crime, they look at where the print is taken, like if there's a broken window and the handprint is near that, so that they can tell that it's probably a good potential of having LAFIS quality prints that we can launch into the system and that we might have a return on.
And as of today, how many cases have not been tested, and do we know how many of them are from violent crimes?
We have approximately 10,039 cases as of October. That it's not technically a backlog. They are just unprocessed cases because there is no intent to get to them because of the staffing shortages. We do not have the ability to process those, so they will eventually fall out of statute.
And do we know how many of them are from violent crimes?
None of them are violent.
None of them.
They're only property.
But during the computer outage, some of those are from violent crimes, are they not? Because we couldn't check anything.
That's my second question. Go ahead.
I saw where you were going with this.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. During the computer outages,
How,
weren't some of those from violent crimes? Because we couldn't check anything.
They were, but what we did was we focused on the ones that we had search results back on, and then it wasn't like a straight, a straight period of time. There were times that came up, so when it came up, we focused only on violent crimes and tried to stay up. So we are current with our violent crimes.
So they spent the bulk of their time hitting the refresh button,
Right.
essentially.
And we're going to give the clerk's revised controller instructions for
Yes.
this also?
Yeah.
So you're asking,
no.
you're asking for the report in 30 days?
So what I'm asking for is, I'm asking that we move this money right away, that we send the controller's report to the Budget and Finance Committee for approval, and I'm asking for, and that to go to the full city council. Separate action, I'm asking that this committee get a full analysis and an audit, and a report back on exactly what just occurred, what was gained, what was lost, exactly what happened so we can ensure that we can hopefully put some protections in place that it doesn't happen again, or look at other alternatives in collaboration with the county and what's happening. So asking for that to come back in 60 days to this committee, but not hold up the funding.
One of the things I would like to let you know is that this is the last year of the contract on this particular system. We've a new, it's called the multi-IMBUS system. It's a multimodal bionic information system that they are going to be implementing. They're in the process right now of developing that system. So this is an aging system
Right.
that is on its way
Can you
out.
include that in the report as well? That'd be great.
Certainly.
Okay. Any other questions?
We appreciate you moving this forward. Thank you.
That's approved? Okay, that's approved. Go ahead and send that as well. I believe that concludes the public safety agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much.